Hi everyone, so I just thought I would do a video all about neocolor pastels because I get a lot of questions about them on Instagram, and I think what often happens is people see people using them on Instagram and Patreon and they buy some and then they don't know what to do with them next. And I was completely the same. I bought some, thought these are really lovely, I don't know how to use them in my work, and then I've actually ended up using them in everything. Like whatever I'm doing, pretty much the neocolor pastels will get involved, and for me they're often the solution to a creative problem. So I'm going to show you what they are, how they work, and then how I use them in my work personally. So more specifically, I say neocolor pastel, but I am talking about Caran d'Ache's neocolor number 2 pastel. So the number 2 is because they are the water-soluble ones, the aquarelle. So yeah, if you just bought the neocolor number 1, it wouldn't be water soluble, so it would still be a pigmented waxy pastel, but it wouldn't have the versatility that the the water soluble ones have. And it's this incredible versatility that makes them such a useful thing in my art kit, and really such good value for money because you can use them in so many different ways. It makes them brilliant for sketching on location, so they're a really great bit of kit. So they are a water-soluble wax pastel. How something can be both waxy and water-soluble at the same time, I do not know. Just one of the joyful mysteries of life, but they are very, very cool. So I'm just going to swatch them for you so that you can kind of see how they behave. So you can scribble lightly, you can press a bit harder, and you can lay down a really solid layer of colour. Also, they are water soluble. So you can use them a bit like a watercolour pencil and draw and then add the water on top, or one thing you can do is you can almost make yourself a little palette. So if you scribble quite hard and put a lot of pigment on the paper, you can then use a clean wet brush to pick it up like a watercolour palette and paint, which is really cool. So if you're painting on location and you don't want to bring a lot of stuff with you, you could do a page on your sketchbook where you do lots of little swatches of colours and then you can just pick up a little bit and paint, which is very cool. Alternatively, what I do sometimes is just use the end of them. So again, clean brush, and I just pick it up from the end and then paint, which is also very cool. So they're incredibly versatile. They are layerable, so we could layer a dark colour on top of there or a lighter colour and could kind of blend them together that way. And personally, I find they really come into their own when they're combined with other materials. So I find they work really, really well layered on top of watercolour or gouache. So yeah, I'm going to show you how that works. So I've done a really, really quick gouache painting of an ice cream, and I'm just going to show you some of the different ways I could finish the painting using neocolor. So putting detail on the ice cream cone, I'm going to use this one, which is cinnamon, and hold it quite upright so I can get a fine point. So they're very chunky, which I like because it sort of forces you to loosen up a bit. You can sharpen them into a fine point, but then there is quite a lot of wastage with that. So some people do that, they sharpen them really fine, and some people have them really blunt and chunky. For me, that's like a good level of sharpness. Like this is one I've obviously used a lot and it's very blunt, so I would sharpen that before I use it next. And in terms of sharpening it, you could use a craft knife, or if you've got a double-sided pencil sharpener like this, you just use the big side. So as you can see, there is quite a bit of wastage, so I don't sharpen them really, really sharp. And then you can peel off the paper as well as you start going down down the crayon. But back to this. So I'm using this, layering over the top, and I could also use very softly shade and put a little bit of shadow in if I wanted, to add a bit of texture. And then looking at the pink, maybe this one. I just want to put some shadow in. I'm just kind of keeping it loose. And then pistachio, you love it or you hate it. I love pistachio. Do I want that shade or do I want a tiny bit of... No, that's too bright. So yeah, I'm adding some shadow and texture into these. And they're quite opaque, so I can sort of define this kind of drip as it goes over the strawberry ice cream. And then I'm going to add a cherry. So you can see how I'm pressing quite hard and it's really kind of solid and pigmented, and then just using on its edge to put this little stalk in, and then we can put some sprinkles on as well. So I'm kind of using kind of on the edge to get that kind of sharper edge. And I'm going to mix up the colours with these. Trying to think what's going to stand out. I'm going to see that. I could even use this 15 minutes. I'm going to work tiny highlight. Just about. I think the white works better laid on gouache rather than on more neocolor, but you can kind of see a bit of a highlight there. So yeah, that's how you could use neocolors to add detail, add texture, add contrast, add depth, and just kind of add a bit of fun to finish a picture. So I'm going to show you how I've used them in my work. So when I first got them, I got a set of 10, which was rainbow colours. So, and they're kind of my least used colours. I think it was maybe like a set like this. And I kind of liked the consistency, but thought I'm never going to use these colours. So then I bought the Baya Rabai sets, which are really lovely. So she's an artist that uses neocolor pastels almost exclusively in her work. And she worked with Karen Dash to put together two really beautiful collections. So a warm set and a cool set, and you can see them here. I've swatched them and they're really nicely balanced because you've got brighter colours, more muted colours, you've got lights, you've got darks. So yeah, I bought these and that made neocolors much more usable because I had more of these kind of subtle warm colours that I love. So yeah, I had to go, first of all I swatched them and kind of put together little colour palettes. I had to play around with them, but I wasn't quite sure how to use them in my work. I had to go using them just on their own, but it wasn't quite working for me. And then the big breakthrough came combining them with other stuff, so using them in a mixed media approach. So this was a lovely bouquet in a jam jar that I was painting, and I was painting with watercolours and the colours weren't vibrant enough. It wasn't doing it for me. I wanted this white flower to stand out. I wanted these, I think these are butterfly ranunculus, these lovely little orange flowers. I wanted them to be bright and zesty, and it was all just very blah. Maybe just a combination of the watercolours and this paper. It wasn't quite working. Everything was a little bit dull. So for me, bringing in the neocolor pastels turned this painting around and solved that creative problem. So I was able to use these really, really vivid, bright oranges, and then suddenly these flowers popped. I was able to use the pink to put in the background behind the white flower, and again it gave me the contrast for the white flower to really pop against the pink background. I also used this purple to put in, kind of scribble in these petals, just capturing a very complicated flower with a lot of petals in a very loose, playful way, so you get a sense of abundance and petals without kind of agonising over painting each individual petal. And again, for putting more of that colour in this is Thai basil, I think, so it's a bit of purple in these lovely flowers, and just dotting that purple around. We've got a flower up here in the centre of this zinnia, and then also in the stalks, and quite an easy way to put that purple in that moves your eye around and balances it and looks so lovely against the green. I've used it for putting in the shadows, so I've used, I think, this one, the umber, for putting in some shadows in the cosmos, and then also a little bit of peach at the end, just picking up that the other colours in the bouquet reflecting on the petals. So for me, the neocolor completely pulled this piece together and solved some of my creative issues that I was having with the painting. Another piece where they really take centre stage is this one, and again it was another creative problem solving. So I wanted to capture a sunset on a river. Sunsets are really, really hard to capture because it's so easy to make them feel kind of sappy and sentimental and overworked and smolty and having too many colours. Yeah, so I wanted to capture kind of a glow and a subtlety of mood. So I painted the background with this light peachy gouache, and then worked on top with neocolor pastels, and then also a little bit of coloured pencil. And yeah, I found it really worked to capture the mood, and it really freed me up to work with something different. So just kind of layering the blue on top of the pink does give this look of a river at dusk, and I was able to layer it up. Another one where they really helped me solve a creative problem was in this piece. So this was based on a photo I took, and it was on a bright sunny day, and there was this beautiful kind of dappled sunlight. So there were trees that were really catching the light, but also there were these deep areas of shadow and this sort of dappled light. So using some darker, bluer toned greens helped me confidently put the shadows in, which really made it pop. And then also having the light against the shadow really worked. So I think I probably used this, kind of like this, just putting the shadows in. You can see it just layers so beautifully over the top of the gouache. It just goes, I just got lovely kind of velvety feel. And then picking out some blades of grass standing out against the dark shadowy background really helped set the mood. So I think that was probably this colour, and you can see against the darker background that it stands out really nicely, and having those blades of grass that are light makes the dark background look darker, and it really builds depth. So I used this one, which is light olive, here on the grass. I used it here on the leaves, a little bit of highlight here on this bush. Also, I painted this shed, and then it had a ladder against it and some bits of corrugated iron, and I didn't paint them in. And then I thought, it looks too perfect, it needs that bit of scruffy corrugated iron leaning against it. And the nice thing about the neocolor pastels kind of going over anything and being so opaque is that I was able to go back in. I think this is probably white. So I went back in with some white and some grey and just pressed quite heavily to get quite heavy coverage, and then put shadows in, and it just kind of really finishes it. I used neocolor for the shadow and the lines on the roof, so I pressed a lot lighter here for more texture. So I've used dark over light gouache, and then here I've used light over darker gouache, so darker shades, and then use the white to put these lines in. So always kind of thinking about putting in texture, putting in contrast, putting in definition. And then final kind of creative problem was there were some little flowers in the foreground, and getting the flowers to stand out against the green background, but also them kind of just scattered in quite subtly. So again, that was really easy to do with the neocolors, that I can just press quite hard and just pop in a little flower like that, just kind of scatter them in and use different colours like that. So again, you can see how using the neocolors has added a new dimension to this painting, and it's really helped push me out of my comfort zone. So something I wanted to get better at was showing light and shadow, being bolder with contrast, and I think they definitely helped me do that. If I just painted this, I don't think it would have had the same level of contrast, and I think the light and shadow really helps capture the mood. Another piece where I've used them, again, visual problem solving, was these reeds that were kind of coming out of the dark at the bottom, and then there was some greenery, and then it was kind of light beigey colour, and they kind of were lighter, but also shadows behind, so visually quite complicated. So with these I used the white neocolour to pick out the stems of the reeds like that, and then used a darker neocolour in behind to put the shadow in, but you can still see the background wash, so it just gives a lot of texture and movement, because visually painting something like reeds on a riverbank is quite complicated. You've got so many different stems, you've got all these different colours and textures, so I felt that handled that quite well. And the nice thing is that you can see that they're reeds, but you can also see the background wash as well, which is nice to see these brush strokes. Pretty much every painting in here will involve some neocolours. So again, with this, I've got this lovely old ship, so I use them to put the texture in here. Just little things like painting my son's hat. You know, the neocolours are so vivid and pigmented, so that really, his little hat really stands out, and his little spade, again, I did that with the neocolours, so it really stands out. And then just subtle things like capturing sand. You know, a big mistake people make when they paint sand is they make it very yellow and very warm, whereas actually this was a very kind of overcast day. It was very wet, the sand was quite cool, and you have these blue tones reflecting from the sky and from the water. So I put this light cobalt blue, and I used it for little pebbles here, and it just gives it a really lovely kind of cool look. It just sort of feels real. You know, this is not a hot sunny day with bright yellow sand. It is the beginning of February in Essex, and everything is a bit grey and overcast and blue. So that worked really well for just putting that texture in and sort of setting the colour tones, the colour story for this piece. And again, I use them a lot for putting in shadows. So these little pieces of my son, I sketched them first in colour pencil. I then painted his suit in quite watered down gouache, and then I used probably this one, or maybe this one, which is malachite green, for putting the shadows in, which again encouraged me to be a bit looser and also a bit bold with putting in the shadows, and you get this lovely texture. And I also use this for very simply drawing his scooter. So, you know, the scooter, just line like that, and it also then gives it consistency across all of them because I'm using this same colour. And again, with his hat, I always use this same blue to paint his hat. With this one, I've drawn it and then gone over it with some water, so it's more solid. But sometimes I just use this on its own to scribble in his hat, but then it gives it a kind of a consistency and it really stands out. And I've, with this one I've just drawn the hat in, just scribbled it in. So yeah, as you can see, there's pretty much not, there's hardly a piece in my sketchbook that doesn't involve neocolor pastels. Yeah, I love the looseness and the playfulness that they bring to my work. So in this piece I've used them to paint my hair, or to draw my hair, and for the boots, putting the shadows in. There's just so many different ways that you can use them. So hopefully this has inspired you. to have a go using them in your own work. And honestly, I could talk about them all day. I keep thinking more kind of examples of how I've used them. They really are useful also for sketching on location when you don't want to bring paints with you. So this was a piece I did in Valencia in a museum, and you can see I've used them for all of this greenery, all the plants. I've used them for the tiled roof, I've used them to put the shadow in, and then I've used this colour, I think, and just picked up the colour from the back with a brush to then paint this in light watercolours and just paint it around them. So this piece is pretty much all, and the sky is also neocolor as well. I think maybe this one. So yeah, this piece is a little bit of Tombow pen for the shadows, but otherwise all neocolor. So yeah, very, very useful for creating a full colour sketch on location without having to be messing around with water and tubes of paint and that kind of thing. So yeah, like I say, I love them. I could talk about them all day. I use them in everything. So I hope this has inspired you to buy yourself a set if you don't have some, or if you do have some and you're not sure what to do with them, hopefully you're now full of ideas of what you can do with them and how you can involve them in your work. If you don't have some yet, I would definitely recommend just dipping your toe in and buying a couple in your favourite colours that you know you're going to use. Jackson's Art sell them individually, Great Art sell them individually. Lots of kind of good quality art stores will sell them individually, and they're not expensive just to buy a couple. So I do recommend getting a few and having a play.